The British Medical Journal, the famous journals in the world, conducted a poll, and they asked which is the greatest medical advancement which has occurred in the last 150 years. So there's a lot of developments which was there in the list. Antibiotics, my God, it has saved a lot of lives. Contraceptives, that has saved a lot of lives. Anesthesia, surgeries have become damn easy thanks to anesthesia. DNA, there's so many uh, uh, discoveries and inventions which have actually helped enhance human life. But then the one which won, was the winner, was sanitation. And that's the emphasis that the passive protection is always much better than firefighting, going and doing something after the water has run down the drain. So that's how massively important sanitation is, and that's the framework with which I'm talking further. So when we talk about sanitation per se and liquid waste management, domestic liquid waste management, 83% of South Asia basically depends on on-site sanitation systems, or they're not connected by the sewer network. So when we talk about on-site sanitation systems, we actually have a system called sanitation value chain. We have the user interface, which is the toilet, and you have the containment, which could be a septic tank or a pit latrine, and then you have the conveyance, which is carrying the waste from point A to point B, and then you have the treatment and the reuse. The Swachh Bharat mission, and then before that, the total sanitation campaign did a lot of tremendous work in ensuring that everybody gets a toilet. Most of the country, we claim 100%, we may not be there, but then most of the country is now having an access to toilet. That was an important, very primary step, because that provided dignity, and that gave sanitation as a right to every individual. So that was primarily very important, very pertinent step which was taken. That having addressed, we moved from people, I'm sure many of you, especially the older generation, would have seen on the railway tracks, especially early in the mornings, a lot of open defecation. Now we actually see it very less, or we don't see it at all. Uh, and on the right, you have Suvidha, which is the world's largest public toilet. Can you guess where this is? Anybody? It's it's for the Dharavi slum, which is the world's largest slum. So this is where we have moved from, and that complex looks like an MNC office, actually speaking. So that's where the strides have happened. So we have addressed the interface challenges. Next is the containment challenges, which is basically you have pit latrines and septic tanks. So this is where I would like to give a small analogy of how things are so challenging when it comes to containment solutions. It was 2004, I was in Singapore doing my master's, and the world's worst known catastrophe in our lifetime occurred, which is the tsunami in Indonesia. And being so close proximity to Indonesia, and me being part of the Watson, we were part of the Singapore Red Cross, uh, went there for the relief work. I basically went for the rehab work, where we were looking at rebuilding homes. So a lot of international NGOs and uh, Red Crosses and Red Crescents were working, building homes for people. But there was one big challenge which everybody had. The groundwater profile of Banda Aceh. Banda Aceh was the epicenter of the tsunami, if you would remember the name. Banda Aceh and Malabo, the twin cities which are drastically devastated. The groundwater profile before the tsunami in Banda Aceh was about 80 feet below ground level. After the tsunami, it was 5 centimeters, which basically means if I would kick hard, there could be groundwater coming out. So that was how bad it was. And then their sanitation system was pit latrines, which would not work anymore, because you'd be basically shitting in the water directly. So I had to look at some innovation here, and that's where my team, we developed a prefabricated uh, plastic septic tank. We called it the septic tank. It's basically a treatment plant in its own right, which uses nature-based system approaches to treat the waste which is coming out from the houses, which is the liquid waste. We also ensured that it treats all the kind of wastewater, which is the black water which comes from the toilet and the gray water which comes from the rest of the home. So that's that being developed. So we got in a lot of entrepreneurs. I had my connections in Bangalore. So we brought them to Bangalore, trained them on how to manufacture this. They went back, set up their manufacturing units, and that became a big enterprise in its own right. And fortunately for me, I happened to attend a program on social entrepreneurship, and that's when it was the first time that um, I was exposed to for-profit social enterprises. Till then, it was like NGOs, no profit, no money. We don't take any money, and we are like, and that changed my perspective. I said, okay, you can also have a social enterprise which can be for-profit, do a good job. And I came back, started my own company, and we started manufacturing this. But that apart, so we started addressing the containment issue. The next part was the conveyance. We had to take this waste from point A to point B, and that's where the enabling environment in the government and the policy came into picture. The National Urban Sanitation Policy 2008, and subsequently the the Manual Scavenging Prevention Act came into existence, which made it mandatory for mechanized desludging of septic tanks and pits. So there's no way any person could enter a septic tank to clean somebody's waste. So that having done, we had all this. I don't know how many of you have actually seen this yellow color tankers moving around on the outskirts of cities, especially, and tier 2 and tier 3 cities. They carry a lot of waste from the septic tanks and pit latrines, and then do what? You discharge it into the open. It is almost equivalent to about 8,000 people discharging their waste in the open. We had to have the next step, which was the treatment of this fecal waste. So, oh, sorry, I didn't change the slide. So we did a lot of projects which involved, once these septic tanks or redesigned treatment plants were done, we did projects involving schools and other smaller enterprises. And then we moved on to what is popularly now known in India as fecal sludge treatment plants, or FSTPs. So the one on the right, my right, is India's first fecal sludge treatment plant, set up at Devnalli, which is near to Bangalore, that's where the Bangalore airport is apparently. So that's where the treatment happened. And then we moved on. Okay, treatment is just not enough. Can we have any resources which can be recovered from this? The picture on the left is a pyrolysis plant. So we brought in technology which is proven in other industries, other sectors, and kind of married it with sanitation, resource recovery, and we could generate biochar, which has huge value in terms of its properties, and that's how that system could look like. Different pictures of different FSTPs, basically treating waste and looking at resource recovery, maximizing whatever can be extracted from the human waste. So the human waste is a very complex but simple matter. Complex because it is a biohazard. It can cause diseases. Simple because it's coming from it is coming from a natural source. We are eating in plants and animals, and then we're defecating. So it's quite simple in that way. If we can handle the bio load of it, we actually get nitrogen and phosphorus, which is a very important nutrient for the plants. And if we can recycle that into the plants, nothing like that. So that's what these FSTPs did. And once this market started developing, we have more than I think about 2,000 FSTPs in the country now, and then it's just growing. Every day we have inaugurations happening, and they're working sustainably too. Once this happened, there's also an ecosystem which started creating. We have an entrepreneur who started something called a loo cafe. So now you go to a cafe and use the loo. Now here, like, you go to a loo and you can also use a cafe. So it changed the perception of how you can look at a toilet. It need not be, अरे coffee day जाना है, coffee costly है, लेकिन toilet अच्छा है. So you change that concept. You're like, loo अच्छा है, चाहिए तो कुछ खा लो, कुछ पी लो. I think that's how it changed that perspective. So loo cafes are a big hit in Hyderabad and surrounding cities. And we had amazing technologies in terms of robotics to clean septic tanks and sewer lines. So a lot of innovation grew around this ecosystem. Sorry. And this is where we connected the first few dots. So we looked at, just like we talk about water security, we are looking at sanitation security. So we're looking at sustainability of how do we, or basically longevity of these resources and the infrastructure which is supporting these resources. We're looking at safety. How do we safely dispose or manage this waste and then reuse and dispose? We looked at prosperity, which is a very not so good word to use in this context, but I would want to use this because it's always good if you have prosperity. You need to have an economic growth. An economic incentive is always a good motivator, if not the only motivator. And then these infrastructures are looking at equity in terms of inclusiveness and also looking at climate resilient designs. So this was the kind of primary sanitation security roadmap which we have all been working for, and the work is continuing. The next is connecting this with the SDG. Now your work with sanitation can impact almost all the SDGs directly and some of them probably indirectly, but almost everywhere directly. You talk about toilets in schools, and then you have no dropouts of girl students, and then you have gender equality, and that will help education for all. You have innovations happening, industry growing, you have protection of water resources, land resources, addressing climate action. So this work in sanitation can fundamentally impact almost all the SDGs. And that is the beautiful picture which you and me can paint as part of our ISR. Thank you.